The story's about my friend and her 6-year-old son. One day, she brought a new phone. When she came home from work, she started cooking dinner and left her phone down on the kitchen table. Her son came into the kitchen and saw the phone. He asked his mother if he could play with it, and she actually told him yeah, as long as he did not call anyone or delete any text messages. So of course the boy agreed and went off to his bedroom, well actually his mother's bedroom, to play with the phone. Around 10 p.m. that night, she went upstairs to tuck him in, and she found him fast asleep on the bed. The new phone was lying on the ground beside the bed. She picked it up and began browsing through the settings to make sure he had not deleted anything. She noticed some minor changes. He had changed the theme, the background, and had given her a new ringtone. She noticed that he had taken some pictures with the phone. She opened the images folder and browsed through the phone. How cute, she thought. He had been taking selfies. Then she came across the last photo in the folder. When she first saw it, she couldn't quite believe it. Were her eyes playing tricks on her? It was a photograph of her son, lying asleep on her bed. But the disturbing thing was that there was someone lurking in the far left corner of the picture. It seemed to show the left side of a creepy old woman's face. Until this day, her son could never answer the question about who that woman was and how she got in there.
My husband won't look at me anymore. He used to tell me I was beautiful. He used to smile at me with adoration. But now, it's like he can't even stand to look at me. And I feel so unwanted. Whenever I call him out, he shrugs it off or just denies it. I've even tried sexy lingerie, buttering him up with compliments, cooking his favorite meals, but I get nothing from him. I'm convinced he's going to ask for a divorce. It's becoming unbearable. I've wondered if I should just speed up the process and leave him, but I really, really love him. So I asked him if he'd be open for marriage counseling, but he refused that too. He says that the only one with issues is me. That is just a plain lie. I don't have any issues aside from how he treats me. To be completely honest, he's had plenty of issues before, and I've always come up with solutions and stuck by him. When he lost his job a few years back, who took care of all the bills? Me. When he needed surgery, who cared for him? Me. When he was jealous of other men staring at me and calling me gorgeous, who took a knife and hacked up her face? Me. I just don't understand his problem. I always do everything for him. I love him so much, but I think maybe I need to make some huge gesture to show him how much he means to me. Any suggestions? A while back, my mom told me and my brother an unbelievable story of how she and her dad had a brush with the paranormal. It was an afternoon many years ago. Apparently, Mom was just talking with the neighbors outside while Dad was fast asleep on the couch, and my then 1-year-old brother was playing upstairs in his room. As for me, I hadn't been born yet, although Mom was already pregnant with me at the time. Mom had just stepped back into the house when my dad woke up with a start, drenched in cold sweat and breathing heavily. Mom asked him if he'd had a bad dream or something. Dad nodded and started telling my mom about it. In the dream, my brother, let's call him Louis for the sake of the story, was just sitting on the floor of his room playing with some blocks when a strange woman appeared. She had a long black dress and hair that hung over one of her eyes. Her skin was pale with black marks all over her body, but strangest of all, she had horns that looked like the branches of a tree. She was gazing at my brother. He didn't seem to notice her at first, but once he did, he started crying immediately. The lady raised her arms and reached out to my brother, as if she was about to pick him up. That's when my father snapped awake, and right when Dad finished describing his dream to my mom, they heard my brother crying. My parents rushed up the stairs and straight into my brother's room. Dad was shocked when he saw the woman from his dream standing over my brother, reaching out exactly as she had in his dream. Dad screamed at her to not touch my brother, and in the blink of an eye, the lady disappeared. Over the next few months, my dad kept seeing the lady in black everywhere. In the house, at our neighbor's front door, at the yard. He once even saw her sitting in a tree by our house. But every time, the moment they made eye contact, she'd disappear. Then came the day when one of our neighbors, Diane, saw the woman too. So back then, my uncle used to live in a house near ours. But unfortunately, he died recently in a motorcycle accident. It was actually not too long before the incident started. Diane was taking care of his birds after his passing. She had just gotten to his house and started opening the windows to let some fresh air in when she saw her. The lady was hunched over the floor as if digging for something. Poor Diane got so scared, she jumped and knocked a knife set off the table. The loud noise alarmed the lady, and she raised her head. She then slowly turned her face towards Diane, and they made eye contact. But the lady didn't disappear this time. She growled deeply like an animal and started to rush towards Diane. Diane screamed in panic and ran out of the house, slamming the door behind her. That was the last known incident with the lady in black. Even after all this time, there seems to be no explanation for who or what she was. And if I'm honest with you, I'm not sure I even want to know.
I will never forget this horrible incident that I've been through. One sunny day, I was walking around the town just to do a little bit of exercise. Then I saw this man who wore a leather hat, a white shirt, and ripped jeans. I usually walk alone, so I was nervous at that time. The man tried to make simple talk with me, asking for my name and my number, but he seemed to be a little bit off somehow. Since I didn't have anything except my phone and my ring, which was a gift from my grandpa, I never suspected he would rob me. He then creepily smiled and asked, "Can I escort you to your house?" "No, it's okay. I can walk by myself. Thank you," I replied. It's not that easy for me to trust a person, especially since I've gained weight these past few years. He then told me that he wanted to show me something in the back of his car. In the Philippines, I know some YouTubers make these kinds of hidden camera content. I knew this guy was acting a little bit suspicious, but then thought maybe he was one of the YouTubers or something. Once I followed him to the back of his trunk, he told me that he would just open it up. While I was waiting for it to be opened, I heard a few screams coming from the trunk of his car. I was confused. There was a button under the car, so I opened the trunk. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. There were 2 girls and 1 boy inside his car. I quickly ran up to the man, punched him so hard in the face, and yelled at him, "Why do you have all these people in your car? Why are they tied up?" The man told me that he wanted to sell their organs because he wants to get some drugs. Just then I got so pissed and then punched him in his face 5 more times. When he finally collapsed, I hurried to get the 2 girls and the boy out of the trunk. They were excited to get out, and I asked what happened to them. "There were 3 of us walking, and this man came up and told us that he has a lot of Xbox games in the back of his car. After we followed him, we realized that it was a trap." I ended up calling the cops. After dialing the number, I felt like it was an eternity waiting for them. They finally arrived after about 30 minutes. After I explained to them that he tried to kidnap us, he eventually got arrested. It turned out the guy was also high on drugs at the time. A few days have passed. I was awarded a medal from the police, and those 2 girls and the boy that I rescued became my friends. The man was sentenced to 37 years in prison for trying to commit murder and kidnapping. It's so lucky for us that we're still alive. What would have happened if I didn't fight back? What would have happened if I just followed the guy's words? I would have been a dead corpse.
My name is Gianna. This incident occurred when I had just finished high school. I was looking for a small and cheap apartment to live in. One day, I was scrolling on this website which had a whole bunch of cheap apartments. Then, one apartment caught my eye, so I checked the description. It seemed pretty good except for the fact that it had a room for a roommate. Honestly, I didn't mind having a roommate as long as it was a girl. And there was a girl who was already living there, so I happily agreed to meet her. My mom came with me to look at the apartment. She said it was a nice place. She also helped me move all my stuff in. Then I met my roommate Connie, and I finally finished unpacking. She seemed like a nice person, but we didn't really say much to each other. One night, I was about to go to bed when I saw Connie walk out of her room, wearing black pants and a white cardigan. "Where are you going?" I asked her. "I'm just going to the bar for a little bit with my friends," she answered blankly. This wasn't the first or second time I saw that kind of reaction from her, so I wasn't particularly surprised to see her like that. I went to bed again, but soon I woke up again from the sound of someone crying. It sounded over-exaggerated and dramatic. So I got out of bed and stood in the hallway to see where it was coming from. Connie's bedroom door was slightly open, and it seemed like the crying was coming from her room. Feeling uneasy, I decided to go and see what was happening there, but immediately felt a sharp pain in my foot when I approached her room. I yelped quietly and flung my back onto the wall. When I looked under my foot, I could see the shards of glass scattered all over the floor. Oh crap. I decided to go wash my foot and came back out into the hallway in my slippers. When I came inside, there was no one in her room, but her clothes were thrown all over the floor, which was kind of weird. That's when I realized the crying was coming from behind the door. I looked to see who was there, and to my surprise, a woman was standing behind the door crying, with no clothes on and holding a knife. It happened in the blink of an eye. She jabbed the knife straight into my leg. Screaming at the top of my lungs in pain, I ran to my bedroom, locked the door, and grabbed a scarf. When I tried to wrap the scarf around my leg, I saw the knife was still stuck inside. I was terrified that the woman was still out there and ended up calling 911. The cops soon arrived at the apartment, and fortunately, she got arrested on the spot. After they investigated the apartment, they found 3 of Connie's fingers inside of a jewelry box. Since then, I have never lived in an apartment with a roommate again.
My name is Mark. This story happened when I was in the 7th grade. One day in July, school had just ended, so me and my friends grabbed our bikes to leave. I used to ride a bike to my house with a couple of my friends. We had a pretty nice neighborhood, so my parents and I thought that nothing bad would happen. But we were completely wrong. When we got on our bikes, all my friends decided to go to someone's house. Everyone except for me and the new kid that I didn't know very well. So, we just said goodbye to the others and continued riding our bikes on our way home. Since my house was a block away from his, we were heading the same way, and we came across a new office building across the street from my house back then. Then I came up with an idea. Hey, why don't we check out that office under construction? He agreed, and then we turned back around and started riding to the construction site, which took about 30 minutes. Once we got there, we wanted to go inside, so quietly, we opened the door and went up to the 7th floor. Keep in mind, this office building was pretty much finished, but not exactly fully finished just yet. Just then, we heard something that sounded like someone's footsteps. At first, we brushed it off as if it was just the floor creaking, but then we heard a gun reloading. Looking at each other in panic, we immediately started running down the stairs. A loud gunshot went off, and someone pushed me down the stairs just at that moment. Thankfully, there was a carpet below, so I wasn't hurt bad, but still needed someone's help to pull me up. The other kid looked behind to see me on the ground and picked me up. We were both panicking back then. The adrenaline surged so hard and we both kept running down the stairs. We decided to look behind us when we arrived on the 5th floor. There was nobody, but we could hear someone running towards us. We didn't have a choice other than to keep running. It didn't take long to get to the 1st floor. When we managed to get out of the building, I looked behind the door again and couldn't believe what I was seeing. There were 5 men chasing us. Since we decided not to split up, we hopped on our bikes and rode all the way to my house. When we got to my house, we jumped inside and decided to look out of the peephole to make sure that nobody was waiting outside. To my horror, I could see some guy's glowing yellow eyes through my peephole. I screamed at the top of my lungs, picked up the phone and immediately dialed 911. Thankfully, they arrived quickly. I'm sure that the police had noticed how frightened we were. The scariest thing was that the guy was still there, even when the cops had just arrived. However, he had soon disappeared when we walked outside to speak to the cops. And after their full investigation of the neighborhood, they found nobody. Now, it's been 5 years since this incident. However, it wasn't the end. 2 days ago, I was walking across the street to go to my friend's house. The same kid that I was with on that fateful day. Just then, I saw someone. Across the street, there was the same man that chased me and my friend down that day. He was smiling so widely, as if it looked like someone stitched his mouth all the way to his ears. He looked straight at me, and then started rotating his head at a full 360 degrees. I screamed at the top of my lungs and started running down the street to my friend's house. Fortunately, I got to his house safely, but I still don't know how that could have even been possible. It wasn't my imagination, and my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. But it was so realistic. To this day, I'm still afraid of him and worried about that one day if I see him again. This time, he wouldn't just look at me, but he could do something much, much worse.
When I was 13, my mom and dad let me go trick-or-treating for the first time without any supervision. All these years later, I can still remember how psyched I was that I was allowed out on my own for the first time. But little did I know, it would prove to be my first and last time trick-or-treating on my own. So at around 5:30, me and a few of my middle school buddies all got together and started walking from house to house. But we were faced with something of a problem. Some of the fancier houses, the ones with spookier decor, were so jammed up with kids that some had literal lines forming down the driveways. So, not wanting to line up for our candy, we figured we'd be smart and knock on the houses that no one else was knocking at. This was not a smart idea for obvious reasons, as the houses with no decorations sometimes just tell you to get lost or pretend not to be home at all. Anyway, we knock on this one house, and instead of getting some grouchy grown-ups, some kid the same age as us answers the door. We didn't recognize him from school or from hanging around the neighborhood, so we're kind of confused, like, trick or treat? All before the kid just slams the door in our face. Feeling suitably rejected, a few of us go to just walk back down the driveway, but one of my friends is like, nah, screw this kid, and knocks on the door again. The kid answers, and my buddy sings, trick or treat, before striking this dumb pose as if to be like, screw you. The kid then absolutely explodes and screams like, you knock on my house again, and I'll kill you, before slamming the door again. Again, most of us are like, dude, let's just go. But this one friend of mine is basically like, oh, it's on. Shoves his finger into the house's doorbell and keeps it there, resulting in this long, solid brrr sound. Even over the buzzer, you could hear the kid running back towards the door from the other side. Only this time when he opens it up, he has this huge, gnarly-looking blade in his hand, like a sacrificial dagger in design, but at least the length of his forearm. As soon as we see it, we just bolt up the driveway and out into the street, but I kid you not, this kid follows us. We managed to maintain a steady distance between us as we ran, and the kid wasn't all that fast of a runner. But in all of our dumb costumes, we couldn't run as fast as normal, so we're in serious danger of maybe tripping, falling, or just slowing down enough for this psycho knife kid to catch up to us. I think the worst part was when we saw some lady taking out some trash and we ran to her for help. She just looked at us like we were playing a prank, and then when she saw the knife, she just bolts back indoors too. I swear to God, that was the worst feeling, thinking, my God, no one's gonna help us. Then, I remember seeing the fastest of us like swerving over to some house on one side of the street we were running down. Then, only when I got a little closer did I realize he was bolting into an open garage. We all follow, and we managed to pull the manual door down just in time to shut out the knife kid, then starts kicking the garage door. This summons the homeowner into the garage, who's obviously like, what are you doing here? But once we explain the situation, the guy runs off to call the cops. We're still in the garage, shaking and panting, still terrified the kid is going to break into the guy's home somehow. But the next time the homeowner reappeared in the garage, he has his cell phone in one hand and a gun in the other. Only then did I actually start to feel safe. Like I'm not even a gun guy or anything like that, but I saw that thing and just thought, okay, if the kid gets in, he's done. And in the moment, that actually calmed me down. Kinda scary that it did, but we move on. Anyways, the cops showed up pretty quick, which meant we had the pleasure of watching that stupid psycho get slammed into the pavement. Kind of a sad story in a way, because we heard the kid was super neglected by his parents, and that he had a bunch of mental problems too. His parents used to leave him alone for weeks at a time because they traveled a bunch for work. Kinda like if Kevin from Home Alone had just suddenly lost his mind or something. I feel for the kid in a way, but honestly, he was lucky he didn't get shot, either by the homeowner or by the cops. And we all hate that kid to this day because, after that, we weren't allowed to go trick-or-treating until we were way too old for it anyway. I'm a DJ here in South Korea, and because English is not my first language, please excuse me if there are any mistakes here. 20 years ago, I was driving home from a late-night wedding gig. It was around 4:30 a.m., and I was driving south on our equivalent of an interstate highway, when at one point, the retaining walls on each side of the highway grew very narrow due to the road snaking through mountain passes and other tunnel-like places. It's not like a particularly dangerous place to drive, but the blind bends definitely made me a little nervous as I slowed down to traverse them. Good job I did too, because suddenly, out of nowhere, a young woman jumped out in front of my car, and I was forced to slam on the brakes hard. I swear I almost gave myself whiplash, but I managed to stop in time, and I was so angry that I got out of my car to shout at her. What was she even thinking that she was doing? She looked up at me, didn't say a word in reply, then actually ran to the passenger side door and climbed into my car. It was then that I realized that she was evidently running from someone or something. So I freaked out for a second and as many minutes, then jumped back into my car and drove off. I kept asking her, "Are you okay? Who's chasing you?" But she only ever replied with, "I'm sorry, I just need to call my mom. I just need to call my mom." She looked to be in her late teens, with dyed blonde hair and dirty clothes that made it look like she tripped a few times while escaping an attacker. I told her it was okay, that I'd drive her somewhere so she could call her parents. But I couldn't get a straight answer out of her because she was panicking and crying. We'd both seen the figure in my rearview mirror as we drove away. It caused her to scream out, which made me speed up. I thought she might calm down a little so she could tell me what was going on. But she was terrified and just kept saying I need to call Mom whenever she calmed down enough to talk. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't she just use a cell phone? Well, this was a time when not everyone in South Korea could afford cell phones. They were in the market, sure, but to buy even a terrible one would require at least middle-class salaries, so I had to wait until I saw a 24-hour gas station to find anywhere the girl could use the phone. I asked her if she needed any change to use the payphones, but she just looked up at me and said the same thing. I just need to call Mom. I think that's when I realized that something wasn't right. It was literally the only thing she said to me for the entire ride, and when we stopped, she just got out and ran into the grocery store. It was very evident that she was terrified of whoever had been following her, and it was also evident that they were too scared to talk about it, so, trying to be a good citizen, I called the police and told them everything. I kept the car running and kept watching the girl as she used the payphone. The police dispatcher told me it would be around 10 minutes before the police arrived, and I was worried she'd freak out if she found out I'd called them. So, that was what was occupying my mind as I watched the girl put the phone down before she appeared to start walking back towards my car. Suddenly, she stopped, and she turned back towards the gas station as if she'd heard something around the corner of it, which was completely dark and not covered by any lights. I watched as she walked closer and closer towards it, almost like someone was calling her name into the darkness. Then, out of nowhere, I saw a man leap out of the darkness, grab her, then drag her back into it. I immediately put my foot down, zooming around to where she'd been grabbed so I can illuminate the darkness with my headlights. It was a matter of seconds, and I thought I'd see some predator trying to drag her behind a dumpster or something, but there was no one there. No one there at all. It actually took my breath away for a moment. There didn't seem to be anywhere for two people to disappear, just a chain-link fence and the rear of the gas station. So where had they gone? Before I got a chance to look any further, the police showed up, so I ran over to their car and frantically told them what I'd just seen. We searched the area completely. They even checked in the back room of the gas station, but there was no one fitting the description of the girl or the attacker. The police thanked me for filing the report, but told me that there was no longer any reason for me to be there. It was about 5:30 in the morning by that time, and adrenaline was starting to wear off, so I did as I was told and went home to sleep. Naturally, it wasn't the most peaceful sleep of my life, and my first thoughts when I awoke were that that poor girl had been dragged into the shadows. And I never learned of her fate. Nothing was in the news about it, and when I contacted the police about it, they just told me it was under investigation. But the thing that I find really scary about the whole thing is how there was a man chasing her when she got into my car on the highway, and we must have driven at least 5 or 6 miles away from the scene. It couldn't have been the same guy who grabbed her, and there's no way of anyone knowing where we were headed. So how was someone able to find her at the gas station? Was it something to do with the phone call she made? I have so many unanswered questions about this event in my life, and sometimes I feel like it haunts me. I find myself scared of total strangers whose names I didn't even know, and as much as I hope she's okay, somewhere, and what happened was part of some horrible but brief chapter in her life, I have the worst feeling that she's not okay at all.
On the last Friday in July, Just before noon, Margaret Myers finished the report she'd been typing and shut down her laptop before emerging from her office. She made her way to the elevator, stopped by her assistant's office, and tapped on the door gently before slightly opening it. "Cindy, I'm headed down to the cafe for lunch. You want anything?" she asked. Cindy placed one hand over the office phone, looked up, and mouthed the words, "No, thank you." This was the last time anyone saw Margaret alive. Surveillance cameras captured her leaving the office complex on the 16th floor and entering the elevator. She'd pressed the down button while chatting on her cell. Presumably, she was headed to the cafeteria on the 2nd floor, but never emerged from the elevator there, nor any other floor in the building, including the roof and basement. It wasn't until 2 o'clock that Cindy noticed she hadn't returned to her office. This wasn't entirely unusual. However, her boss was notoriously punctual. If she were running late for anything, she could be relied upon to make it known to her assistant. Cindy sent a text, but hadn't become overly concerned. Margaret was a well-known and equally well-liked attorney in a prominent law firm, and thus her schedule could be erratic. Additionally, Cindy had a mountain of paperwork to attend to, so her absence was soon forgotten. Around 5, she packed up her briefcase and visited Margaret's office to have a word before leaving for the day. The office was empty. Again, she didn't consider this odd enough to be alarmed. Sometimes she held meetings that ran late, so Cindy might have simply missed her. With a busy weekend planned with her new boyfriend, she was eager to hurry home and prepare. The weekend passed with no sign of Margaret. Calls and texts went unanswered, and by Tuesday morning, law enforcement agencies, co-workers, volunteers, friends, and neighbors were frantically searching for her. Janitorial and maintenance staff scoured the building with no trace. Security staff worked overtime with detectives to review and scrutinize every second of known footage, and were still left completely clueless. On Friday, a paralegal noticed a peculiar smell within an elevator and called maintenance. It was the same elevator that Margaret had been seen entering but not leaving. Her body was discovered on top of the elevator. The maintenance hatch of the elevator's cabin was intact, locked, and securely tagged with no evidence of tampering. The autopsy revealed little, citing only faint traces of minor cuts and bruises, but nothing significant. The coroner's official cause of death was death by misadventure and/or natural causes. To this day, it still remains unknown exactly how or why her body came to be on top of the elevator. A sizable reward offered by the law firm has never been claimed, and the mystery remains unsolved. If you have any information, please contact us immediately.
My little boy is sick, and I am the one who has to take care of him. He has been isolated in his room for a few days now. He is not allowed to come out. I carry his favorite meal on a tray and knock on the door of his room. "Honey, it's Mommy. I've got your dinner here. Your favorite." I open the door gently as to not wake my little boy in case he's asleep. However, he's sat up, wide awake, waiting eagerly for his food. I approach the corner where his mattress was placed on the floor and kneel in front of him. "Thank you, Mommy." My little boy suddenly lurches forward to hug me, but I step back out of his reach. The chains enclosed around his neck and ankles stopped him. I can see anger and frustration cross over his face, but it only lasts a moment. He sees what I have brought for him. He smiles when I set down the tray and digs in. I blankly watch my little boy chowing down on the meaty skin of the mailman who popped by this morning. His favorite part of the dinner are the eyes. He says they taste sweet and juicy. It makes me want to throw up. Everything about this makes me want to throw up. But like I said before, my little boy is sick, and I am the one who has to take care of him. He's finished. The tray is empty, and it is time for me to go. When I pick up the tray and turn my back to him, I hear his sweet, innocent voice sound out. "I feel better, Mommy. Can I come out now?" Hearing those hopeful words is like a stab to my heart. I suck up my despair and say, "Soon, my darling. Soon." "Oh, okay, Mommy." The disappointment in his voice will haunt me tonight. When I leave his room in the basement, I lock and bolt the door. I then collapse to the floor and cry. When will this nightmare end? Will my little boy ever be better again?
I'm a guy in my 20s working part-time at a convenience store. This unforgettable incident is the scariest thing I've ever experienced while working here. It was a few months ago. There was a boy who came to the convenience store every day. He looked like a middle school student and wore a baseball cap. However, he was always crying whenever I looked closely at his face. I thought he might have some backstory. Seeing him every day, I felt a sense of closeness toward him. So I asked him what was going on, but he always kept his mouth shut and never said anything. The strange thing was that there was always a very big guy following him. At first, I thought he would be one of his family members, but he had a suspicious look about him. One day, the child hesitated as if to tell me something. Then the big guy approached him, and he glanced at the man and went outside with him. I knew something was going on. He seemed like he needed help. I made up my mind to talk to him and help this poor kid when he comes in next time. The next day, the boy came back to the convenience store. Still, he was wearing a baseball hat, and the big guy was following from behind. Once again, I plucked up my courage and asked quietly what was going on. He glanced back and seemed to say something, but said nothing. I whispered to him, "I'll help you. I'll call the police if you need me to." Then he opened his eyes wide and quietly said, "No." He looked terrified. Poor thing. I wanted to help this kid. Then the man behind looked at us with a frown, approached us, and quickly took the child outside. I couldn't get the kid out of my head the entire time, but I didn't know what to do. The next day, he showed up again. I told him again that I would help any way I could. He still remained silent and gave me no response. This time, I eventually decided to follow the kid. After he left, I closed the convenience store and followed him in secret. I guessed that the child was living close to the convenience store, and I was right. I found out the location of his house. When this big guy who was always following the child went somewhere else, I grabbed the kid's shoulder. He looked at me with a shocked face, looked around, and soon began to talk to me. He said that he was kidnapped and was watched by the other men. I don't know when they would come. He also told me to run as soon as possible. Hey, let me help you. However, he kept saying that if I called the police, we would all die. Then he hurriedly pushed me and went into the house. I was so confused. Then two larger men suddenly approached and asked me, "What are you doing here? Do you know the kid?" While I was in a panic, they suddenly grabbed me, tried to drag me into the house, and one rummaged in his pockets. I pushed them away with all my might and ran like crazy. I could hear the men shouting, "Get back here or I'll kill this kid." I was worried about him, but I had no choice but to run in fear. Eventually, I got out of there and shivered for a long time. I tried to call the police, but suddenly remembered the child's face telling me not to call them. I couldn't do anything. Time just went by, but I didn't even have the courage to go there again. I haven't seen him since that day. After so many days, he no longer showed up at the convenience store. He was even no longer seen near his house. After that, I quit working at the convenience store and stayed in fear for a long time. But I still live that day in my mind. It's just a constant loop. I wonder what happened to the kid. What kind of men were they? And is he still alive?
I live in a duplex, and I think the girl on the other side of the house must be some sort of social media influencer. The walls are thin, and she talks all the time. And I'm always hearing snippets of her recording videos or doing live streams. Anything from makeup tips to her favorite recipes to DIY hacks. I tried to find her channel once to see her videos, but I'm not that active on social media, and I don't even know her name, just her face and voice. So I gave up. We don't cross paths often, and I've never been good with the friendly neighbor. We do kind of smile and nod things when we see each other, but that's it. But the last few times I've heard her, she sounded off, like she's forcing the happy voice for her videos. I've been working from home for over a year. The only other place I really spent time was my boyfriend's house. That's why I've gotten pretty familiar with her tones. Now I can even tell the difference between when she's recording for her channel or when she's on the phone with friends. A few months ago, she sounded extra perky, and I heard her mention something about a new boyfriend. I was happy for her, even if hearing it made me a little sad. I hadn't been seeing my own boyfriend as much lately, since he'd been busy with a new project at work. But lately, things don't seem as good for her. I noticed the subjects she talks about seem to have changed. Instead of the typical thing, how I prep a week of meals in an hour, or let's unbox this free set from so-and-so, I've heard her say something like this. Today, I want to teach you about how to notice red flags when you start seeing someone, or tips from moving on from a stalker. I was starting to get worried about her. I was considering going to knock on her door and introducing myself to see if she was okay, but I was swamped with work at that time. And I'd finally heard from my boyfriend after a few days of radio silence. I shrugged it off, thinking she had enough people supporting her. Maybe she was just getting into the true crime genre like every other girl, and I was being overdramatic. I ended up going to stay the night at my boyfriend's. I got home an hour or so ago and was settling in for dinner and a movie on my couch when I heard a different voice on her side of the house for the first time. And it was my boyfriend's voice. I just heard what he said. I think I need to call 911. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to teach you how to get revenge on the bitch who broke up with you.
4D is my passion. 4D is my life. 4D This lottery is also how I got started in this business. My dad has been buying it since I was 6. He must have had the luck of the devil because he always guessed the top number every time. In fact, he was so lucky that he didn't even need to find a job. The $500 that he got every time was enough. When I turned 18, he took me to the betting shop for the first time. I remember the excitement when I handed the piece of paper to the officials. After running back home, my heart pounded with anticipation. I remember reading the results in the newspaper the next day. I won second prize! My father was proud of me. He beamed as I showed him my winnings, and the money was fully displayed on the dinner table, like it was the most exquisite art piece. From then on, the betting shop would be like my second home. Running down there to buy it and checking the numbers in the newspaper became almost like a routine. Most of the time I won nothing. I was frustrated and despondent. Yet still, I was determined. I could still win this. Thus, I started researching how to improve my chances of winning. That was how I stumbled upon the advertisement one day. It was written in big, bold colors. Better chance to win big, triple the money. I just needed to give them a little something extra. It was exactly what I needed. I woke my father up the next morning. I told him I would take him out to the betting shop, just the two of us, father and son. He agreed readily. He was getting old now. He was getting so old. His face was wrinkled, and his hair was silvery gray. We took the taxi to the betting shop. After I bought 10 tickets, I marched up to the officials and handed them the money. Here you go. Take whatever you want from him, I said in Cantonese, shoving my father forward. He started to gasp and look back at me with his pleading face, but my face was like a stone as the old man in charge opened the gates and dragged my father inside. I turned and walked away as my father's screams echoed out of the shop. They went all out taking their payment. Eyes, arms, legs, whatever they wanted. Blood pooled out of the entrance and ran down the drain. That night I checked the website. Despite buying 10 tickets, none of the numbers I bet on made it to the draw. I gnashed my teeth in frustration. I will win those $1 million one day. My brother looked over my shoulder. What's this? You know 4D? I asked. Hi. Do you want to come with me to the betting shop tomorrow?